Go Cubs, go, baby.
Well, let's take our focus away from what's happening over in Syria and focus now on what's happening over at the State House. And a lot happening or not much at all. News Talk 94.7 and 970 WMAY. The Senate adjourned yesterday, and they are off for 2 weeks. The House, they're in session today, but what can we see happen? We'll find out now with State Representative Tim Butler joining us live in studio with News Talk 94.7 and 970 WMAY. Representative, thanks for taking time this morning. How
Bishop, good morning. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, always good to talk about the issues with you. So, what do you expect happening today?
Well, I don't
substantive.
I don't expect. Well, we'll see. But we had a couple contentious pieces of legislation on the floor in the House yesterday when it came to the issue with the nurses at the prisons, and as well as this lifeline proposal that the Democrats threw out there. And as you said, we go in session today. We adjourn today. We're out for 2 weeks. The Senate's already out, so not much is going to happen over the next 2 weeks. I don't anticipate a ton to happen today. They may, the Dems might throw a couple of their bills they've been trying to get through, such as the $15 minimum wage or something like that. We'll see if that actually comes up. But obviously, they never give us any advance warning what's going to be on the floor. So. I was really disappointed with this lifeline proposal that the Dems put out there yesterday. It really shows I think the true nature of the Speaker and the way he operates. There was no negotiation over it. There was no involvement with the Republicans, and they decided to throw this out there and basically as a political ploy to give their members cover to try to go home over the break and be able to talk about the fact that we're doing something. And it's just not the way to do business, but it's the way that the Democrats have done business for far too long, controlling the chamber. So I think we need to get serious about these negotiations. We've got till the end of May, obviously, in this session to be able to work on things. I do think discussions continue in the Senate on the budget, and I think I wish that the House Democrats would engage in that process, but obviously they don't want to engage in that process.
Is it too late, though? I mean, we've seen the reports of social services across the state continuing to hemorrhage. You've got a university saying they're going to close their doors for 3 days. The last stopgap expired January 1st, so it's now April 7th. I mean, why is it taking this long? Why now all of a sudden, sprung on Republicans Wednesday, a measure to sweep funds and then throw money at universities and social services and MAP grants and whatnot? Is this just a way to somehow appease people in the short term and delay any future action to resolve truly the state's budget problems?
I truly believe that if this lifeline budget would get enacted, which it's not going to. The governor has said he's going to veto it. It did not get enough votes in the House to sustain a veto override. The Democrats don't have the ability to do that. But if this lifeline budget would get enacted, I don't see where the Democrats want to move forward with the full budget. There are Democrat leaders that have been on record for over the past year, and as well as recently, that have said that they do not want Governor Rauner to have a full budget for his full 4 years in office. Now think about that for a second. That's not the Republicans saying that. That's not the governor saying that. That is Democrat leadership saying that the governor is not going to have a budget. So all the blame that's been focused on Republicans and the governor, I think people need to look at the Democrats and the words that they have actually said, that there will not be a budget enacted. So their answer is to string agencies along and to string universities along with little morsels of food to keep them going through these proposals. And instead of sitting down and negotiating and hammering out a legitimate budget that is far overdue. Yes, it's too late. It's far too late. We should have done this 2 years ago. We should have done this last year, but it's the situation that we're in. And if we would pass this budget, this lifeline, and enact it, there wouldn't be another budget coming down the pike. And we're going on vacation for 2 weeks here. We're on break for 2 weeks. Nothing's going to happen. The Senate cannot take up this budget at least for another 2 weeks. The governor then has 60 days to sign it. And he said he's not going to sign it. So let's get real. Let's get off the political games and sit down and negotiate a budget. And
part of that process, negotiating the budget, something that I haven't seen in 2 years at the State House, and that's a revenue estimate. I know it's kind of this, it's this, little idea that not many people know about, but why is that so important for there to be an official, actual resolution resolving what revenue estimates are?
So I don't know if you listened to the debate yesterday, but at the end of the debate yesterday, one of the Democrats read from the Constitution, the provision in the Constitution that the governor is supposed to submit a balanced budget. And the Democrats get on their high horse about this, that it's in the Constitution that the governor doesn't. The thing that the Democrats never talk about is that very next section in the Constitution. And I read that next section after my colleague said that. And the next section says that the legislature must pass a balanced budget and we must pass a revenue estimate. That's what it says. I've been here for 2 years. We've never had a revenue estimate. And the revenue estimate is very important because it tells us how much revenue is coming in the door, and it lays the marker down for the legislature to say, these are the means that you have to live within. And the Democrats have refused to have a revenue estimate the 2 years that I've been there. I think it underscores the way that they operate and the fact that they're not serious about getting a truly balanced budget in place that all sides would agree to. If it was up to the Democrats at the end of the day, I think they would want to pass a $40 billion budget and raise taxes, hike taxes enough to pay for that $40 billion budget.
We're talking with State Representative Tim Butler. The House will be in session today. It's unclear as to what exactly they're going to do for the day before they take 2 weeks off. But yesterday there was a lot of debate on the floor about this stopgap budget, this spending plan that sweeps funds. It doesn't draw from GRF at all, and that was something that Democrats wanted to be sure was clear. And we understand it is it's just sweeping funds. It's not taking from GRF, but at the same time, it's not addressing deficit spending through court orders and consent decrees. Why is that so important that we actually address those lines of spending?
Well, state government has been on autopilot through these consent decrees and these court orders, and it is not. It doesn't allow us as the elected officials to manage the checkbook. It allows the courts to just say, let's continue to spend, and it gets back to the revenue estimate. Very honestly, the consent decrees and the court orders do not have to live within a revenue estimate. They don't have to live within the revenue that's coming in the door. We are constitutionally mandated to pass a balanced budget. One of the first things that I voted on after I got in 2015 was cleaning up the Quinn budget, what was left over with a $1.5 billion budget hole. Republicans took the initiative and led the way and passed a balanced budget, filled that hole, without raising taxes and without borrowing money. And so it's important that we get off these consent decrees and we get off these court orders and get back to having a truly a budget that is passed by the legislature and one that's balanced. That's how we're going to live within our means, and that's how we're going to move the state forward. We can't continue to live off these court orders.
7:45 now with Bishop on Air. I'm talking with State Representative Tim Butler live in studio. News Talk 94.7 tonight, 70 WMAY. So the stopgap piecemeal spending plan that Democrats did approve yesterday in the House. That wasn't the only contentious piece of legislation that was debated thoroughly on the House floor. You also had the minimum manning for prison nurses. And one thing that I was rather struck by was the Democrats' refusal to address the costs, to address any of the impact notes that were requested by Republicans. Why are those so important?
Well, I think when notes get filed, and this happens fairly often, where especially on large pieces of legislation, we can request notes to find out the impact on state mandates on spending on a variety of things, and those are those notes are given to us by the administration, but to say here's how it's going to impact a certain agency. And I think those are important because it gives us insight as to how a piece of legislation is going to impact government and the spending and the mandates that are put on. So, but often the Democrats view that as a way to slow down the legislation because the legislation isn't supposed to move forward until these notes are filed, and sometimes it takes a while to get these notes, but then the Dems vote to just do away with the requirement to have the notes. So I mean, it's a way for us to be more informed to make our decision, but sometimes people look at that as a way to slow down the legislation.
Where did you stand on the nurse bill?
You know, that was a very difficult vote for me. I have the Logan Correctional Facility in my district. 4 nurses have been given their pink slips at Logan. But at the end of the day, I voted against the legislation as is. I wish there would have been a little more negotiation on that legislation. I've been in a lot of discussions with the governor's office about addressing this. And I'm hopeful that maybe we can move forward in a different manner. But I do think that the administration should have the ability to manage their employees, and this was a way to manage the employees. I do have some concerns about Wexford and the private entity that it does a lot of the medical functions at our prisons. That all these nurses that have been laid off will have an opportunity to go to work for Wexford or other state jobs. But at the end of the day, for me, I think it's a way for the administration to be able to manage the staff that they have. But I'm not happy with the layoff notices, and I'm going to continue to discuss with the governor's office ways that we can work around this.
It seems somewhat contradictory for Democrats to say, "Governor, do your job, hashtag do your job or get it done," or whatever the catchphrase is. Are they allowing him to do his job with legislation, not necessarily this particular one with the nurse minimum manning, but even when it comes to other operations, are they giving the governor the ability to properly be the executive and manage state operations?
The governor has to have the legislative ability, the legislative authority to appropriate dollars to carry out programs. It is our responsibility, constitutionally, it is the legislature's responsibility to pass legislation to appropriate dollars. We have refused to do that for 2 years. We have not been able to do that for 2 years. I think it's the legislature and the Democrats specifically who need to do their job. They need to come to the table and negotiate. The governor has been handed a situation where he has tried to manage in an incredible, circumstance to try to manage the situation to make sure that the state completely doesn't fall apart, and the state has fallen apart because we haven't done our job in the legislature. So, I think it's beyond hypocritical for the Democrats to say that the governor's not doing his job, because it's the Democrat leadership in the General Assembly that has to pass the legislation to give the governor the ability to carry that out.
Saw almost the same storyline last year, Representative Butler, where no budget in place. Democrats last minute pulled together some kind of stopgap piecemeal plan, and they want to pass it before they go on break and tell their constituents we're doing something. And ultimately nothing happened because the break was there, and you got to read things in 3 days and the procedural issues. But then all of a sudden you had the governor take action. I can't remember exactly what it was. Maybe in like autism funding or whatever the issue was. It was a management type of decision that had to happen because there wasn't any money. Do you think that something similar could possibly happen in the next 2 weeks? And who's to blame, and how do you think it's going to be used politically?
Well, I don't see anything much happening over the next 2 weeks. I don't know what the administration has in mind, if they got some ideas on how they want to manage the cash flow and things like that. Obviously, they need to work with the comptroller's office on some of these cash flow issues, and the comptroller has not been willing to work with the governor on these things. At the end of the day, I would urge the governor's office to work with the Senate, because obviously Speaker Madigan doesn't want to work with the governor. There has been obviously some discussions going on in the Senate with the Senate President and Leader Radonio to try to get something done.
Well, and not just with the grand bargain, but also you've got Senate President, or rather Minority Leader Radonio, seeming to give a green light to other ideas as well to start advancing.
Absolutely, and I think the Senate, whether it's Leader Radonio and President Cullerton, whether it's Senator Brady's proposal for the budget that he's put out there, I think you're seeing the Senate more willing to take action than the House does, and more willing to work with the governor. And so I would suggest that the governor work with the Senate. Let's see if the Senate can get something over. And then really put the pressure on the speaker to say, hey, you've got everybody at the table except for you that wants to get this done. And so I'm hopeful that maybe something like that would happen. Again, I mean, we should have had a budget a long time ago, but we are in regular session until the end of May. Let's see how this plays out over the next few weeks. And see if we can't get something done here over the next 2 months. And then if we don't get something done by May 31st, I would urge leaders on both sides and the governor to make sure that the legislature stays in town until we get this done. We can't go into the summer and into the fall without having something in place.
State Representative Tim Butler live in studio with News Talk 94.7 and 970 WMAY. And any big plans for the 2-week spring break?
Well, Mrs. Butler and I are taking a few days off and going to see a little music, but then we'll be back. I'll be back running around the 87th district and interacting with constituents and seeing what's on their mind.
And tell us about your day in the life that you've been doing. I've been following this. It's a lot of fun to see, where you're at today. And
So yesterday I did a little day in the life and just kind of did video and photos and things like that across my different social media platforms, just to see, so people can see what happens on a regular day, from getting up in the morning working out to feeding the cats to going last events of the evening till 8 o'clock or so. I think it's one of the great things about social media. It allows us to communicate with people directly. And hopefully, people understand that I'm just a regular person, just out doing my job, and it's a good way to put it out there.
And how can people find you?
They can look at me on social media. Just find Rep Tim Butler across most media platforms, or they can always go to my website at reptimbutler.org or call my office 782-0053. More than happy to always have fun interacting with folks.
Very cool stuff. All right, Representative Tim Butler, greatly appreciate it, and we'll talk again in the near future.
All right, thanks, Bishop.
News Talk 94.7 and 970.